Hey guys, my name is JC and welcome to today's gameplay video featuring Memnarch. The goal of this deck is to ramp hard, cast our commander, steal our opponent's permanents and then use them against them to close out the game. If you enjoy the deck, make sure to check out our deck tech where we explain all of the included cards as well as the overall strategy. But with that said, let's get to the game. So looking at this opening hand, I'm pretty happy with it actually. 3 lands, we've got turn 2 ramp into turn 4 ramp. We have card draw if we need it, and we also have Cyclonic Rift, which is going to be really good against the Lathril player if they go wide. Now we will have to be careful against the Baral player, no doubt they're going to have a lot of interaction. But hopefully if we can ramp fast enough, then we should be able to play through that, or at least keep recasting our commander if it does get interacted with. Lathril starts by playing a land, and then they cast a Sol Ring, and that's it for their turn. Baral plays a land for turn, and they leave it there. We draw a land for turn, so we'll just start by playing our land and passing the turn. Lord Windgrace starts by playing a tapped land, so they're going to be able to scry 1, and that's it for them. Lathril plays their second land for turn, and now they cast their commander, Lathril Blade of the Elves. So it's got menace, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. You can also tap it, tap 10 untapped elves you control, so each opponent loses 10 life and you gain 10 life. So that's a great start for them, turn 2 Lathril, especially in the face of a Baral player. So they've gotten it down. Let's see if Baral ramps on turn 2 here, or they just hold up mana. They cast their commander. So instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast, and whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. And that's it for their turn. We draw Ottawara, Soaring City. So some interaction that even Baral's going to struggle to deal with. So we'll play our land for turn, and we'll just get down our Felwar Stone. And we'll just pass it there. Windgrace plays their land for turn, and they do have it come in tapped, and then they cast a Bloodchief's Ascension. At the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you put a quest counter on it, and whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if it has 3 or more counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life, and they gain 2 life. Very powerful card to get down, especially this early. And we don't really have any ways in this deck to gain life, so we're going to have to be careful of it. Hopefully we can steal it before it becomes a problem. Though dealing with a Lathril down this early, and I have a feeling they're probably going to come our way, means that we may be swarmed with tokens. That's why I'm very glad to have Cyclonic Rift in our hand. So they just move straight to combat. They actually send Lathril over at the Baral player. So that triggers Lathril, and they make 2 Elf Warrior tokens. Now in their second main phase, they start by casting a Skull Clamp. Well, this has certainly been a good start for the Lathril player, that's for sure. They immediately clamp one of the Elves, so that draws them 2 cards. And now they clamp the other token. That brings them up to 9 cards in hand. Now they cast a Burgeoning. Whenever an opponent plays a land, they can put a land from their hand onto the battlefield. And now Bloodchief Ascension does trigger, because the Baral player lost 2 life, so that puts a counter on it. And that's their turn done. Well, I really hope that the Baral player has a Pongify or Rapid Hybridization or something in hand to get rid of that Lathril ASAP. They play a land for turn, it triggers Burgeoning. And they do put a land into play. And now they cast Patron Wizard. Tap an untapped wizard you control to counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Well, I gotta say, our seeding in this game is absolutely horrible. Being right after the Baral player is not where you want to be. So this is going to be quite a tough game for us, even this early. But otherwise, that's their turn done. We draw a Voltaic Key for turn. So we'll start by playing Seed of the Synod as our land for turn. That will trigger Burgeoning. Let's see if the Lathril player has another land in hand. And they do. So they've got access to all the mana and all the card draw. I'm just hoping the Baral player is noticing that. So we'll go for it here. I don't think that the Baral player is going to try to counter a Sisay's Ring, but let's find out. They allow that to go through, thankfully. Well, let's try to get our Voltaic Key down now. I don't think they're going to try to counter that. And they don't. But otherwise, we'll leave the turn there. Windgrace plays their land for turn. And they put another land into play. And now they cast Azusa Lost But Seeking, allowing them to play 2 additional lands on their turns. They play a land for turn, and it is a Cabal Coffers. They can pay 2, tap it to add black for each swamp they control. That triggers Burgeoning. They put another land into play. Now they also put a Temple of the False God into play, which triggers Burgeoning again. It looks like they finally run out of lands though. They didn't put one into play that time. And that's it for their turn. Now they do try to cast Entomb, but it looks like the Baral player taps their Patron Wizard to counter it unless they pay 1. Which is definitely a welcome sight. Now, because that ability did counter something, they do get to draw and then discard. So the Windgrace player might have been better to actually hold on to that Entomb instead of casting it straight away on their end step, especially knowing that the Patron Wizard was up. Okay, so the Lathril player starts by casting Pride of the Perfect. It's an enchantment elves you control get +2/+0. Well, that's certainly going to put a clock on things, and that's something that typically Baral decks can struggle with, is if you already develop a board of beaters. They don't have a lot of answers similar to us to being able to answer a wide board state. So now they move to combat, this time Lathril swinging at us. We'll have to take the 4 damage. So now Lathril triggers and they make 4 elves. Now in their second main phase, they start chomping them up using Skull Clamp. So they sacrifice an elf here to draw 2 cards. Now they cast Life Force, an enchantment where you can pay 2 green to counter target black spell. So that's only really going to be relevant against the Lord Windgrace player. Now they clamp again. Now they move into their end step, Bloodchief Ascension triggers again. And that's their turn done. Baral starts by casting a Mystic Skull. 1 and tap it, add 1 mana of any colour. Pay 5, tap it, transform it, so lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any colour. They start by casting Mana Vapors. Lands target player controls don't untap during their next untap step. Ooh, so that should slow the Lathril player down a little bit. That's really good to see. That buys us a little bit of time. Now that they're tapped out, this might give us a prime opportunity. We're going to have access to 8 mana next turn, so we may be able to cast our Seagate Restoration, which means we can pay for Patron Wizard if they do decide to tap it. And I think we need to draw that amount of cards to get us ahead in the game, especially if this ends up being a grind fest. So let's see what we draw for turn. A Copy Artifact. Unfortunately, Skull Clamp isn't really going to do much for us, and we definitely don't want to copy that Mystic Skull. So we'll start by playing Otawara as our land for turn. That triggers Burgeoning, but they don't put a land into play, which is good to see. So let's tap Sisay's Ring for 2. We'll untap the ring, and let's see if we can cast Seagate Restoration and just hope that Baral doesn't have any free counter magic in hand. They do actually tap their Patron Wizard here, so we'll pay the 1 for its ability. Oh, and that's right, I forgot that Baral is also a wizard. It's not just itself that taps. Well, that's a bit of an unfortunate error on my behalf, so they do tap it to stop us there, so they're obviously pretty worried about us drawing a lot of cards. We can't pay, so that will get countered, unfortunately, which means Baral can loot again. So unfortunately, that is our turn done, and we'll just have to keep that in mind going forward, that they can actually tap down 2 wizards. So now Windgrace starts by casting their commander. They can uptick it, discard, then draw a card. If a land is discarded this way, draw an additional card. If they neg 3 it, return up to 2 target land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and if they get to the ultimate at 11, destroy up to 6 target non-land permanents, then create 6 2/2 green cat warrior creature tokens with Forest Walk. Now they activate Windgrace using its discard then draw ability, and they discard a Grave Scrabbler, which has Madness, and that's their turn done. So now the Lathril player starts by just moving straight to combat, and they're sending their commander over the Baral player's way. They can't block, so they'll take the damage. But now they cast a Primal Bellow in response to the damage going through. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each forest you control. Ooh, that should give it quite a buff. So now it becomes an 8/7. That damage goes through, and now they make 8 Elf Warrior tokens. And with that, that actually has the Baral player conceding. So now it's just down to 3 of us. Well, I wish they would have conceded before they counted our Seagate Restoration, but that's the way the game goes sometimes. Well, at least our one saving grace now is that we know we're not going to get counted. We can cast this Cyclonic Rift, reset the board at least a little bit, and hopefully get us back into this game. But otherwise, that's them done for turn. We draw a 1 with the machine, which will be really good when we get our commander out. So I think we'll start by casting our Copy Artifact, targeting our Sisay's Ring, and then we'll just pass the turn there. And all we've just really got to hope is that the Lord Windgrace player doesn't have a Red Elemental Blast or Pyroblast in their hand to be able to counter our Cyclonic Rift, because if that happens, we'll be in a lot of trouble. So they activate Lord Windgrace, discarding then drawing. Now they cast an Imperial Recruiter. When at ETB, search for a creature card with power 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Okay, let's see what they get. And they find themselves a Stinkweed Imp, likely for the Dredge ability. They float some mana and then play a Golgari Rot Farm, which means they have to return a land to their owner's hand when it ETBs. That triggers Burgeoning. They play another land for turn which triggers Burgeoning, but no lands go into play. And now they cast their Stinkweed Imp, so they may be having it there just as a blocker, because if it deals combat damage to a creature, it destroys that creature, so it's essentially Death Touch. And that's their turn done. So we're hoping to get lucky here and they play out some of their cards on their main phase, so they won't have as much mana to be able to recast things when we Psych Rift in combat. They start by playing a tapped land for turn. So they start Skull Clamping their Elf Warriors. So they draw 2 cards there. Now they cast a Priest of Titania. They can tap it to add green for each elf on the battlefield. They clamp another elf. And now they cast a coat of arms. So that would pretty much be game there if we didn't have this Psych Rift in hand. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one creature type with it. So their commanders are 13/12, 12/10s. So they're all quite huge elves at the moment, so they move to combat. They are sending their commander our way, and all their other elves over at the other player. Now the question is, do we take the damage here? Because that's quite a lot of damage going at the other player, and that means when we get to our next turn, it's going to be a lot easier to close out the game. Though it's also quite greedy because it just means they'll need one more hit in at us to be able to take us out. So if they block 3, and they actually scoop it up there, unfortunately, so that's a bit of a shame because that does change the way obviously we're going to play now. So in response to that, we will cast our Cyclonic Rift with Overload. But I really wish the Lord Windgrace player didn't scoop there because it gave us an interesting dilemma to have to deal with. So that bounces everything back to their hand. So they just start by recasting their Soul Ring. And that's their turn done there. So now they have to go to cleanup, getting rid of 7 of those cards. Okay, so we go to our turn, we draw a Liquid Metal Torque for turn. Well, that'll be good because that'll save us part of our cost in being able to start to steal things. So I think we do try to get our commander down here. So let's start by tapping our rings. So we'll cast our commander. Now, I don't think there's any point at the moment keeping up the mana to turn a permanent into an artifact. So we'll just use our mana to cast our Liquid Metal Torque, just get a bit more ramp down. And then we'll pass the turn there and hope Memnarch survives, because if it does, the game's definitely swung our way. And the Lathril player is really going to have to think how they proceed forward here. Especially because we're going to have the ability to steal their Soul Ring, and eventually their lands if they don't play out too many things. And at that point, once you start stealing the player's lands, it's pretty much game over. So they start by casting Life Force, which isn't really going to help them here at the moment. Now they also cast their Priest of Titania. And now they are casting their commander, so maybe they do have some removal or some way to interact with Memnarch in hand. They tap their Oran Reef the Vastwood so they can put a 1/1 counter on a creature that entered the battlefield this turn, so both their elves get the counters. And now they cast Instill Energy, enchant creature, it can attack as though it had haste, and you can untap enchanted creature but only once during your turn, and only during your turn. So they do go to combat here. Unfortunately, because of Menace we can't block, so we'll have to take the damage. That triggers Lathril, they make 3 tokens now. And it looks like that's it for their turn. We draw an island for turn. So we'll start by playing said island. So what I will do to start is I'm going to cast 1 with the machine just to draw us some cards. So we draw quite a few lands, another piece of ramp, and a Mystic Remora for card draw. So I think we will attempt to get the Mystic Remora down here just so we can start drawing more cards. And then we're going to attempt to steal their commander here. So we'll turn it into an artifact. And then we'll attempt to gain control of it, which we do. So now we have their Lathril under our control. Now, we definitely don't want to go to combat here, so let's just pass the turn and hope we can hold on to their commander. They start by playing a land for turn. Now they tap their Priest for 5 mana. And now they cast Pride of the Perfect again, giving all their elves a big buff. That triggers Mystic Remora, which they can actually afford to pay, so let's see if they pay for it. And they don't actually pay for it, surprisingly, so we will draw a card off of that, and a mana drain. Well, that will be useful when it gets to our next turn, but let's see what else they've got in hand. So now they've got 3 ones ready to attack. And they recast their Coat of Arms. That triggers Mystic Remora. And they decide to pay for that one. So these elves are going to be quite big, and they're probably going to do quite a bit of damage to us now. So they're each 7/5s at the moment. So that's going to be 21 damage they're going to be able to get through to us. So they do move into attacks, sending everything in. We definitely won't block. We take the damage going down to 12. And it looks like that's it for their turn. Mystic Remora triggers, so we'll pay the 1. We draw a Chromatic Orrery for turn. That's really good to see. So I think we'll start by going to combat. We'll send in their Lathril. The damage goes through and that triggers our Lathril. So now we're going to make 7 elves, which are now all currently 12/12s. Now we'll get down our Chromatic Orrery. Now we're going to tap our Orrery for 5 and get down our Clock of Omens. We'll play our land for turn, which is an island. We don't want to use the Ancient Tomb scene as our life is getting pretty low, just in case the elf player does have anything too tricky. Then we're going to use our Liquid Metal Torque to target their Priest of Titania. So it becomes an artifact until end of turn. We'll untap our Chromatic Orrery with our remaining mana. Then we'll gain control of the Priest. Then I'll also get down our Silver Mirror here, just as a way to be able to untap our Chromatic Orrery if we need to. But otherwise, sitting back on mana drain and potential access to be able to steal another thing, I'm feeling pretty confident. So let's see what our opponent's got for us. So they just move straight to combat. But then they pass through combat, and it looks like they've seen enough there. They probably didn't draw any answers, and that was it for them. Well, that was quite an interesting game. Let's go to the wrap-up and discuss what happened. Well, that was a close game and it could have turned out quite differently at several points. The Baral player caught us off guard with their Patron Wizard countering our Seagate Restoration, which meant we not only lost a powerful card draw spell, but we also lost the tempo of the turn. Fortunately, the early combat damage pressure applied by the Lathril player meant that when they did concede, we were in a much better position, because had they continued in the game itself, we would have really struggled to resolve some key spells being seated right after them at the table. The Lord Windgrace player actually had a really good start too, and they were in a prime position to get ahead of the game, but unfortunately for them, the Lathril player was just simply faster, and they conceded the game when they thought it was all over for them. But that was a big advantage for us, as Memnarch having to only steal things from one player really put us in a prime position, because Memnarch is simply stronger when it becomes a 1v1. The Lathril player probably had the best start you could hope for in that deck, landing a turn 2 commander, a Skull Clamp for card draw, and a Burgeon in which, with a landfall deck at the table, meant that they could ramp fast. Fortunately for us, keeping that opening hand with a Cyclonic Rift in it really paid dividends, and it was the tempo swing we needed to change the game. Once we were able to land our commander and it became a 1v1, we were able to steal the key permanents we needed to close out the game. Well, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed today's games, and if you did, don't worry, we still have a few more games coming out with this commander, which will be out soon. But until then, take care guys.